Is Iragoth giving you trouble as a free-to-play player? Don't worry, I got you. What is going on, Raiders? Soda Dragon here, and today we are focused on the Hard Doom Tower and Iragoth. And I'm going to show you free-to-play friendly teams that you can use to beat him, including the last stage, 120. And all these teams are full auto. So the first thing we're going to do is go over Iragoth and his skills. Then I'm going to show you the strategies to beat him. After that, we're going to go over the teams, their gear and masteries, and the different variations and substitutions that you can use for your own free-to-play friendly team. By the way, guys, how have your 2x summons been going? Let me know in the comments if you've pulled anyone interesting or you're excited about. For me, I got super lucky and pulled a non-dupe in Little Miss Annie. So I can't wait to build her up, gear her out, and maybe do a champion god on her. I'm a big fan of all the Halloween characters because I just love Halloween. So she's really cool, real creepy, hard-hitting, single-target nuker, so I'm excited. So let's start with Iragoth's skills, beginning with Spike Storm, his A1. Attacks all enemies. Places a block active skills debuff for 1 turn. Damage based on attack. So the good news is with all of Iragoth's debuffs, and all of the debuffs for the minions as well, they are all resistible. So resistance is one of the strategies that we will be talking about later. On to Iragoth's A2, Spirit Rush. Attacks all enemies. Inflicts bonus damage for every turn remaining on all enemy skills cooldown, plus 20% damage for each turn of cooldown. Places a fear debuff on enemies with no skills on cooldown, damage based on attack. So the takeaway from this A2 is to make sure that you use your skills when you can. Now there will be some skills that you just cannot use and that are circumstantial. For example, Silver Drake's Revive. If there's no one to revive, you can't use that skill, right? And Iragoth gets a buff when he uses this A2. Also, that A1 will prevent you from using your skills as well with that block active skills debuff. So that just means extra damage. So you can resist, as I mentioned, that A1, that block active skills debuff. And you can also resist here the fear. So make sure when you can use your skills, go ahead and use them. The more skills you have unused, that means the harder Iragoth is going to hit with this skill. On to Iragoth's A3, Soulburst. Attacks all enemies. Puts all enemy skills on cooldown. Fills Iragoth's turn meter by 5% for every turn remaining on all enemy skills cooldown. Damage based on attack on a 3-turn cooldown. So this skill of Iragoth is just like Warlord's skill. He has that AoE putting everyone's skills on cooldown. It's just the same. And like Warlord, this can be resisted. So there's a few ways to go here. One, you can just build a completely high resist team, everybody. So that means when Iragoth uses this A3, he puts nobody's skills on cooldown. You can go that way, but what's going to happen with the second part is that Iragoth is going to get a turn meter boost. So 5% for every turn remaining on all enemy skills cooldowns. That can add up to a lot. He might just get a double turn immediately, okay? And just because you're resisting the skills being put on cooldown doesn't mean you're resisting the damage from those skills. But nevertheless, that's one way to go. Another way to go is to put resistance on specific members of your team. So let's say a reviver, for example. You can build that person high resist, so they always have their skills available, especially their revive skills, when needed, and then everybody else can have their skills put on cooldown. So that's kind of one way to work a team, and Iragoth would still get a turn meter boost, but not as much because maybe it's only 1 or 2 members of your team that are resisting that putting the skills on cooldown attack. Another way to go is just to not worry about this. And that's actually going to be the route we're going to go. It doesn't matter if he puts all our skills on cooldown. It just doesn't matter. It's quite hard to build a 5-person team with resistance high enough to counter all of this. Plus, Iragoth would get a double turn if you have that complete high resist team. So a partial resist team is a possibility, but the way we're gonna go, just a heads up, we're not really gonna care about this skill. So we don't really care that Iragoth is gonna put our skills on cooldown. So that's our strategy. On to Iragoth's first passive, Conjure Souls. Summons 3 minions at the start of the turn. 1 Eternal Priest, then 2 Eternal Guards. Iragoth can have a maximum of 3 minions in battle at any time. Places an Eternal Rage buff on Iragoth for 2 turns if only 1 minion is summoned or no minions are summoned by this skill. This buff cannot be removed or blocked. The Eternal Rage buff increases Iragoth's speed and causes Iragoth to ignore unkillable, block damage, shield buffs, and ignore 50% of the target's defense when attacking. This is on a 5-turn cooldown. So it is possible to work with a block revive strategy for the minions here, but notice if only 1 or no minions are summoned, then Iragoth gets this really powerful buff, alright? And man, he starts hitting really hard. So basically, what you need to do if you're going to use a block revive strategy is to only block 1 of the minions from reviving. If you block 2 or more, he's going to get that Eternal Rage buff, and it is so powerful, okay? You might not have like block damage, shield, etc., but he ignores 50% of your defense. So he just hits super hard. It is an AoE, so make sure if that strategy is one you're going to use, the block revive, you are at maximum only blocking 1 of the revives of the minions. Just a heads up, we're not going to be blocking any revives for our strategy. On to Iragoth's second passive, Consume Soul. At the start of the turn, sacrifices an Eternal Priest, resets the cooldowns of Iragoth's skills, and grants an extra turn. If there are no Eternal Priests on the team, sacrifices an Eternal Guard and heals Iragoth by 15% of Iragoth's max HP. This skill will be on a 4-turn cooldown at the start of the battle, and will activate and go on cooldown every 5 turns, even if there are no Eternal Priests or Eternal Guards on the team, so on a 5-turn cooldown. On to Iragoth's third passive, Otherworldly. Immune to Stun, Freeze, Sleep, Provoke, Block active skills, Block passive skills, Fear, True Fear, Decrease Speed debuff, Poison, and Heal reduction debuffs. Also immune to HP exchange effects, HP balancing effects, and turn meter reduction effects. So we won't be able to slow Iragoth down with that decreased speed debuff, which it would be awesome if we could, but we can't. And we cannot decrease Iragoth's turn meter. But on the flip side, we can increase our own speed with that speed aura, with that increased speed buff, and we can increase our own turn meters. Another interesting thing to note is that we can actually put Iragoth's skills on cooldown. So we can do the same thing that he does to us. So if you have Warlord, if you have Senesha, if you have Elagaius, champs like that, we can actually put his skills on cooldown. What we cannot do though is use that block active skills debuff. So unfortunately, like Lugan, somebody like that, that block active skills debuff will not work, though we can directly put Iragoth's skills on cooldown. So that is a viable strategy. That being said, don't worry about not having a champ that can put enemy skills on cooldown. We don't care about it. We don't care about Iragoth using his skills. We don't care about them being on cooldown. It doesn't matter to us. Let him use it. Our strategy does not revolve around preventing Iragoth from using his skills and putting them on cooldown, though it is a viable strategy. Lastly guys, Almighty Strength. Damage from skills that scale based on enemy max HP cannot exceed 10% of the boss's max HP when attacking the boss. So your characters like your Cold Hearts, Royal Guards, or Septimuses, for any one attack they do, the damage cannot exceed 10% of the boss's max HP. So it's not like you cannot use those characters, but the damage is going to be limited from them. So what is our strategy going to be to deal with Iragoth? He seems so complicated. And yes, he is complicated, but thankfully our strategy is not complicated at all. So the first part of our strategy is to ignore Iragoth's skills. That means we don't care if he puts our skills on cooldown. We don't care if he puts that block active skills debuff on us. For the most part, we don't even care if he puts fears on us because he actually doesn't do it that often. Okay, so we are not concerned with Iragoth's skills. What are we concerned about? Iragoth's damage, because he hits really hard, especially in Hard Doom Tower 120. He hits super hard. So of course we're concerned with his damage. But part one, we are not concerned with Iragoth's skills. That means we are not building a high resistance team. Okay, that should be some relief to you guys because Iragoth's accuracy is 350. And the way resistance works, to resist debuffs, you have to have significantly more resistance than their accuracy number. So we would have to be pushing like 400 plus resistance to resist Iragoth. So thankfully, that is not our strategy. So once again, yes, we do have to be concerned about Iragoth's damage, but not his skills. So whether he puts that block active skills debuff on us, fear, puts our skills on cooldown, we don't care. So we are not building a super high resist team or any team members that are able to resist Iragoth. So that 350 accuracy number is for Iragoth, Hard Doom Tower level 120. So if you're thinking about making a resistance team or making certain members high resistance in your team at lower levels of Hard Doom Tower or normal Doom Tower, that accuracy number goes down significantly. So it is much more attainable if you're looking at doing that to make a resist team for those lower levels of Hard Doom Tower and normal Doom Tower. But that's not what we're looking at today. We are looking at the hardest Iragoth, once again 120 Hard Doom Tower, and his accuracy is 350. So we are concerned with this highest, hardest Iragoth. Part two of our strategy is going to be how to deal with Iragoth's damage. Like I said, we're not concerned with the earlier Iragoth versions where he doesn't hit that hard. We are looking at Hard Doom Tower 120 and he hits super hard. So how do we deal with his damage? We need that strong version attack down debuff on him the whole time. We need 100% uptime on that attack down debuff on Iragoth. Not only that, guys, I'm not done. It sounds simple, but we need that debuff on Iragoth for 2 to 3 turns all the time. Okay? We need that attack down debuff on Iragoth, and that debuff needs to have 2 or 3 turn expirations on it all the time. So why is that? Because we can have 100% uptime on attack down, right? And it expires in 1 turn, and then we just reapply it the next turn, right? Why can't we do something like that? Why do we need that debuff on Iragoth for 2 to 3 turns? Why can't we just reapply it every turn for 1 turn? Here's why. Sometimes he takes double turns. That is why, all right? So if you have that debuff on Iragoth for 1 turn and he takes his first turn, sure, that turn the damage is mitigated, right? His attack. But what about that second turn that he takes immediately after? You don't have the time to reapply that attack down. That is why sometimes Iragoth takes double turns, okay? That's why you need that debuff not only on him all the time, but for 2 to 3 turns. So that is going to be the secret to this comp. Not only attack down on him for every turn, but that debuff itself needs to last 2 or 3 turns all the time. If Iragoth takes a turn against you, okay, and he attacks your team and he does not have that attack down debuff on you, it's likely multiple members of your team will wipe. It's very, very likely. You're lucky to survive with no team members dead if that happens. All right, so part 2 of our strategy, once again, is not only going to be attack down on Iragoth all the time, but that debuff needs to last 2 to 3 turns all the time. Alright guys, on to part 3 of our strategy, and this relates to part 2 insofar as we're talking about damage mitigation. But part 3 of our strategy is going to be resisting debuffs. Now I know what you're saying, wait a second, you said we didn't have to resist any debuffs, we don't care about Iragoth, and whether it applies fear or he puts our skills on cooldown, whatever, we don't care about him, right? Yes, we don't care about Iragoth. What we do care about is his minions and their debuffs. So in particular, what we really care about is this decrease defense debuff. Okay, so those minions apply it, it's AoE, and we really want to avoid that, because if we have that decreased defense debuff, even with attack down on Iragoth, he's gonna hit us so hard. And if he doesn't have that attack down debuff, and we have decreased defense on us, our whole team is just gonna wipe. It's done, okay? So we have to play this medium resistance game, all right? So it's not high enough to resist Iragoth, thank goodness, because building plus 400 resistance is not easy, considering you have to build tankiness, accuracy, and all that. So we want our resistance high enough to resist those minions, but we're not shooting for Iragoth numbers. So what are the minions' accuracy? On Doom Tower 120 hard, it is 230. Okay, so we need enough resistance above 230, as much as you can scrounge up while still maintaining accuracy, HP, defense, etc. Okay, above 230 to resist their debuffs. Now, truth being said, you can occasionally take some of those debuffs. It's okay. Really, what we're trying to avoid is taking them all the time. Okay, we do not want to take that defense down debuff consistently on our team, because even with attack down and Iragoth, it's going to be too hard to make up those healing numbers from that damage that he's doing. Okay, so ideally we are resisting those guards and priests, and they also do provoke as well, AoE provoke. So yes, we do want to resist that as well. So our strategy is a medium resist team, just enough to resist those minions with their defense down and provokes, but obviously not high enough to resist Iragoth himself. So those numbers should be much more attainable, because remember, for a lot of our characters, they are applying debuffs too, so we need to build them with accuracy as well. So building a high accuracy, high resist champ is not easy, especially if we want that tankiness, okay? So once again, we're shooting for medium resistance. What is that? It's probably about 300, or really as high as you can spare, to be honest. It's very unlikely that you're going to be able to, at least on characters that we need accuracy, build a ridiculous amount of resistance as well. Okay? So if you can get anything above 230, if you can get 300-ish, that would be great. Okay? But like I said, it's going to be hard. And really, you don't need it 100% of the time. We don't need to resist the minions debuffs 100% of the time. We just want to resist them most of the time. Okay, so that is really gonna be what determines that luck for you, whether or not you finish the run. Okay, whether or not you resist the minions debuffs enough, so Iragoth doesn't hit as hard. So we're looking at a medium resist team. We're not worried about Iragoth, but we do want to resist the minions and their debuffs. Alright guys, on to part 4 of our strategy, and it is healers, healers, healers. So what are we looking at with healers? Because not all healers are created equal. And I'm not talking about, well, you need legendaries and, you know, legendaries versus epics or versus rares, anything like that. The kind of healers we need are people that can heal without casting skills. Okay? People that can heal without casting skills. So take Syl of the Drakes, for example. She heals with her passive. at the start of every turn, she just heals everybody, right? 10% of their health. So notice she's not casting a skill to heal anybody. She just heals. Same with Doom Priest, right? At the start of a turn, everybody gets 7.5% of their health back, just at the start of the turn. Take Vrask, for example. So we have Vrask here. He's great. No matter what skill he uses, he only has 2 skills. But if he hits somebody with a crit, and both his skills are attacks, but if he hits somebody with a crit with any of his skills, he will heal everybody for 10% of his health. So in general, people that heal based off their max health are better than people that heal off everybody else's max health. Because if I max out that one guy, that one healer guy, and put his HP really high, then he's going to distribute more of that healing to everybody else. But Vrask is a great choice, because once again, he is not casting a skill to heal. He just does it, right? If he hits somebody with a crit, which he will do very often. And as I mentioned, don't worry about the fears. It doesn't happen that often. It's true if Vrask is feared and he loses that turn, he won't heal anybody, unlike Syl and Doom Priest. But don't worry, it doesn't happen that often. But really, the healers we want to avoid are those people who have to cast that healing skill or spell, okay? Why? Because all of our skills will be put on cooldown. Once again, we are not resisting Iragoth. We have a medium resist team and we are resisting the minions, okay? But not Iragoth. That means Iragoth is gonna put our skills on cooldown, okay? That means we cannot rely on healers that have to cast those healing skills. Now, can you use a healer and make them super high resist so that they can cast their healing skills? Sure, I've done it. You can, but for this comps that we're talking about, you don't have to do that. It's hard, trust me, to build super duper high resist characters, especially if you want other attributes, right? Defense, HP, accuracy, etc. Okay. Thankfully, we don't have to do any of that. Okay, so we are looking at healers that can heal without using skills, because all of our skills will be put on cooldown by Iragoth. So 3 great options, and we'll talk about more. All right, guys, part 5 of our strategy. How do we deal damage back to Iragoth? So the primary way that we are going to deal damage back to Iragoth is going to be through War Master procs. Okay, so everybody on the team is going to have that tier 6 offense mastery, War Master, or Giant Slayer if you have a multi-hitter on their A1. Now, what about Drex and HP burn? Sure, we can bring him in, and I'll show you. There's no problem bringing that in, and it makes the run faster. But think about what we're giving up if we do that. We're giving up another potential healer. Okay, so we do not need Drex. We do not need HP burn. There is nothing wrong with having a team without HP burn at all. It is not necessary, okay? And I did a run earlier without Drex. It just takes longer. That's fine. So it really depends on your champs and your gear. Can you afford to give up another healer in place of Drex? If you can, sure, bring in Drex, and your clear times will be a lot faster. But sometimes you cannot afford to do that. Maybe your gear, your champs just aren't that good. So you do need to have that healer in place of Drex. Okay? So it's up to you. But in any case, whether or not you bring Drex in, that War Master proc or Giant Slayer is going to be a big chunk of damage to Iragoth. And teams without Drex, it's going to be the only source of damage, really. Okay? So once again, everybody, including Drex, if you use them, we're having that War Master or Giant Slayer mastery. And if you can afford it, if you can afford to lose one healer off your team, then put in Drex, and your clear times will be faster. But HP burn is not necessary for this boss at all. If you don't have Drex yet, or when you put Drex in, your team just dies too much, no problem. It's going to be a longer run, but you can beat Iragoth Hard Doom Tower 120 without HP burn. Okay, so once again, that is optional to bring in that HP burn. All right, guys, the last part of our strategy, and probably the most specific, but one that I think will help you guys out a lot, and I don't really hear talked about, is that we need 2 champions on our team with attack down on their A1s, high chance. That attack down must be a 2-turn attack down, and we need this mastery on both of them, Master Hexer. So we have a 30% chance to potentially extend that attack down debuff to 3 turns. So from 2 turns to 3 turns, okay? Once again, we need 2 people on our team that have the strong version attack down debuff on their A1s, a 2-turn attack down debuff, and both people need to have this mastery, Master Hexer, okay? Now, can you do Hard Doom Tower 120 with 1 attack down champion? Sure you can, and I've done it before, but if you want to make things a lot easier on yourself, especially if you're free to play and you don't have like, ridiculous legendaries, you need to bring 2 people. That is my recommendation. 2 attack down champs, strong version attack down on their A1, high percent chance, and both need to have Master Hexer. So we'll go through what I think are the best options. Neither are legendary, thank goodness, right? But this will make your life so much easier, because really, when do you wipe for 120 Hard Doom Tower? When that attack down debuff expires. That's it. Especially when he takes a double turn and you don't have a chance to reapply it. That is when you wipe. So it is so important as far as damage mitigation to keep that 2 or 3 turn attack down on the boss at all times. And it's really hard for one person to keep that up, especially trying to match his speed along with resistance, along with accuracy, along with tankiness, along with all those things. So to just have 2 champs that can do it really helps. Okay, so this is my recommendation. Especially for free-to-play players, you have 2 attack down champs, all right? Not 100% necessary, but trust me, I am saving you a lot of time and heartache, all right? So just bring 2, your life will be a lot easier. All right, guys, on to the champs for our different comps, and we start with Jarek. And you guys know he is one of my favorite champs, and he does have that strong version attack down with a high percentage for 2 turns on his A1. Now, booked, it is only a 60% chance, but it's okay, because once again, we're bringing 2 attack down champs to our comp. Once again, which is what I would really recommend, especially for you free-to-play players, all right? So Jarek has that, and the cool thing about Jarek is he is a healer, okay? Once again, we mentioned that we want healers that can heal without having to cast skills, right? And he can do that. He has this cool passive where if someone takes more than 20% of their max HP from a single hit, which Iragoth can do a lot, even with attack down. I mean, he hits really hard, all right? Then everyone gets a continuous heal buff, which is really cool. And you can extend this as well with lasting gifts. You can extend this 1-turn strong version continuous heal to potentially a 2-turn strong version continuous heal. So that is a great mastery to pick up. So Jarek is definitely going to be our first choice, not only for that attack down, but for the healing. Jarek is a healer, so if you have him, he was a great choice for this comp. Another reason I use Jarek is I actually use his aura. Increased ally HP in all battles. It is super useful against Iragoth, okay? Now, if you're running really tanky characters, sure, you can put Drex in the lead for more accuracy. But if you're not, once again, especially if you're free to play or you're struggling or you're a new-ish player, maybe mid-game, all right, and your gear isn't up to par yet, having this increased 33% HP, it makes such a huge difference, all right? So I use him in this lead for his aura, I use him for his attack down, and I use him for that passive, which heals everybody with those continuous heals when they take big hits. So there's just so many different ways I use Jarek in this comp. So what about Jarek's gear? So here I have him in a stalwart set and an accuracy set. So that stalwart set, negative 30% damage taken from enemy AoE attacks. So we're taking 30% less damage. Everybody does AoE attacks when we fight Iragoth after we get past the waves, okay? Everybody does AoE attacks all the time. So he's getting minus 30% damage from all attacks pretty much once you get to that final boss fight. And accuracy, because we need to land debuffs on Iragoth, okay? So you see my accuracy is 339, it's fine, okay? The way accuracy and resistance work is for someone to be able to resist my debuffs, their resistance needs to be significantly higher than my accuracy, okay? So if they have a similar resistance to my accuracy, most of the time I can land those debuffs. For them to resist it, they need significantly more resistance than my accuracy. And guys, that's something big to remember for the arena as well. If you want to make high resist teams, your resistance has to be significantly higher than their accuracy, okay? Which is next to impossible if they put on that increased accuracy buff, okay? But even beyond that, it's still pretty hard, okay? So we have Iragoth at 330 resistance, so my accuracy does match his. And once again, the way accuracy and resistance function, that's fine. The majority of times within that percentage, once again 60% when booked on his A1, I should be able to land that debuff, which is really what I'm looking at. So Stalwart is a good general choice for Iragoth, especially 120 hard. So I actually don't use Stalwart that much, and my Stalwart gear, to be honest, isn't great, but it's good enough, all right? It is good enough for the hardest Iragoth. So hopefully you guys have some Stalwart gear. If not, Lifesteal can work. It depends on how tanky you build your characters, but Stalwart is a great choice. So if you're looking at Iragoth and Doom Tower is something that you're interested in, like you want to do it all the time, like I do, Doom Tower is something that I love to do, then start building your stock of Stalwart gear, okay? Because when it comes to Iragoth, that is a great choice for your characters. All right, guys, let's look at Jarig's bottom pieces of gear. So here I have him in a defense percentage glove. So good. HP percentage would have been better. For the chest, accuracy. Now, if you're talking about building champs with both accuracy and resistance, especially high accuracy and high resistance, chances are you will need to use either an accuracy or resistance chest, all right? Because you only have one banner, all right? So that is usually where people put in that accuracy or that resistance. So if you want the other side, let's say the banner is accuracy, but you want resist as well, well, now you're gonna have to use that chest piece for that resistance. Okay, so here I have him in an accuracy chest piece just because, once again, it's challenging to build both accuracy and resistance because you only have one banner. So accuracy chest works just fine. And lastly, speed boot. He does have to take turns. He is not that fast, my Jarig, but it's okay because we have 2 attack down champs. All right, so once again, the builds I'm showing you, and when you look at the total stats, nothing insane. Should be relatively attainable for you guys, okay? Now, if this was my only attack down champ, I would need him to be faster than Iragoth. And 120 hard, Iragoth is 250 speed. So not only would I have to build my champ here with speed, but with accuracy and resistance as well. Plus building those tankiness stats like HP and defense. Very, very hard, okay? So just to lessen what you need to do and the gear you need to have, really 2 attack down champs is gonna work much better for you than trying to build 1 really fast, high accuracy, high resist attack down champ, all right? Trust me. And the banner is gonna be a resist banner, okay? So once again, if you want both those stats, you want accuracy and resistance, chances are one is gonna be on the banner and the opposite is gonna be on that chest piece. Let's look at Jarig's total stats. So we have him at 47,000 health, which is good. Attack is not relevant to us. Defense 3,200, which is fine for this boss. Jerrig is just a tank, all right? He's good to go. 187 speed, which is fine, once again, when you have 2 attack down champs, okay? It lessens the burden of speed, okay? Because once again, we're building all this other stuff too. So 187 is just fine, and you'll see because we have those dual attack down champs. Crit rate and crit damage, we're not really concerned about. Debuff resistance 270. Once again, the minions, their debuff accuracy, Hard Doom Tower 120, is 230 accuracy. So we want to get above that, okay? So as I mentioned, if you can get 300-ish, that would be good. 270 is pretty good. I don't get those debuffs all the time. And once again, the more you can resist, the better. And a lot of this gear is unglyphed. So if I were to glyph them out, then definitely I could hit that 300 number. But there's no need. I'll show you. The gear that I have on these champs, the majority is unglyphed. It works. All right. So this resistance level is okay enough to resist the majority, at least, of those debuffs from the minions. And debuff accuracy, we have a total of 325 right here. So once again, the resistance of Iragoth is 330, so we're matching that. And as I mentioned, having an accuracy equal to the resistance when you're trying to apply debuffs is fine. So the vast majority of time, I should be applying that attack down when it hits within that percentage for that A1. All right, guys, on to Jerrig's Masteries. Now, feel free to just copy and paste this to your own Jerrig. It works just fine, but I'm just going to highlight a few of these. So here we have Life Drinker. It's great because healing by 5% of damage when under 50% health. It might not sound like a lot, but in conjunction with the skill down the tree, which is War Master, where you get a big chunk of bonus damage, that 5% ends up being a lot. So Life Drinker is great for these long, drawn-out, tough fights. Next, we have War Master. So what this is it's basically like a baby version of an enemy max HP skill, kind of like what Cold Heart, Septimus, Royal Guard, some of those characters have. Now, it doesn't proc all the time. It only occurs 60% of the time, but you have a chance to do damage based on enemy max HP, which is a lot. All those skills that do that, the damage is based on who is being hit, not the person doing the hitting, okay? And War Master is not affected by, for example, attack up or attack down, things like that, okay? It just does its damage. What it is affected by is if there is a weaken on the target, then War Master will do more damage. But great skill. It's a requirement for everybody on the team. Potentially, you could run some people without it. I would not recommend it, especially on teams without Drex, because that HP burn, that's a big chunk of damage. So without that, you're going to need another big source of damage. It's going to be your War Master, or here, as I mentioned, Giant Slayer functions in a similar way, getting that bonus damage based off enemy max HP. And this is good for characters who have an A1 that hits 3 or more times. But for me personally, I just always go with War Master. I don't care how many times their A1 hits. I've never noticed any difference, so I always go War Master personally. So on the support tree, here we have Lasting Gifts. This is great for Jerrig's continuous heal, right? That cool passive that just puts a continuous heal on people when they take 20% or more damage from a single enemy attack. It's great because instead of 1 continuous heal, which is big, now you potentially get 2. So this is great for Jerrig. Here we have Master Hexer. As I mentioned, for every attack down champ, you're going to need Master Hexer. You want that 2-turn attack down to be potentially 3. Once again, we are shooting for a 2 to 3 turn attack down strong version on Iragoth the whole time. The whole time. A 1-turn attack down is not good enough because sometimes he takes double turns. Okay, so Master Hexer helps us to do this. All right, so definitely Master Hexer. So if you were to run a Jarek just like by himself, he is your only attack down champ. Instead of lasting gifts here, it might be worth it to take Sniper. Because remember, booked Jarek for his A1 only has a 60% chance to land that attack down. And you need 100% uptime on that attack down. So if you don't have anybody else, or you just plan to use Jarek by himself, then I would recommend taking Sniper. Okay, so you want to increase that from 60 to 65% chance to land that attack down instead of lasting gifts. And then your other characters are going to have to take up the slack with healing. All right, so that is definitely an option depending on who else you're using for your Jarek. But if you're running 2 attack down champs, which is what I recommend, then you don't need Snipe. All right, guys, on to our next attack down champ, and that is Padma. If you have her, she is great for this role. As I mentioned, we want those attack down champs to have attack down for 2 turns on their A1 with a high percentage chance. And we want that attack down to be the strong version, all right? So here we do have that strong version attack down on our A1 for 2 turns. Plus, when booked, it is a 100% chance to land. Plus, if she gets a crit, everybody on the enemy team will get attack down. So this is great. If you have her, she is such a good option. Not only for that high chance to land attack down, but for also landing it on everybody. So that means if she happens to be provoked and she attacks one of the minions in that battle, well, she will still apply attack down or reapply attack down to Iragoth. So that is the great thing about her. It doesn't matter who she hits on the enemy team. Everybody is going to be getting that attack down. So her other skills, as I mentioned, they will be locked out. So they are not why we are using her. But since we do want that AoE attack down, we need to build her with crit rate, which is what I recommend. You're not utilizing her to her fullest unless you build her with crit rate. That way, it doesn't matter who she hits on the enemy team. Everybody is getting that strong version attack down. All right, guys, on to Padma's gear. So it's very similar with what we saw with Jarek. So we have a Stalwart set and we have a Perception set. So the Stalwart set for AoE attacks, negative 30% damage. Plus we have that Perception set, plus 40 accuracy and plus 5% speed. So that Perception is better than the accuracy set, all things being equal. I have tried Padma in a Lifesteal set. And for Doom Tower 120 hard, for my gear, what I have, it wasn't good enough. She needs to be in Stalwart. So once again, it really depends on the gear you have. If you have awesome Lifesteal gear, that would be a good option, okay? Or whatever gear you have, you know, feel free to experiment, obviously. But for me, she works really well with Stalwart gear, which is probably a safe bet when it comes to the high level Iragoth battles. Okay, Stalwart gear is gonna really take you further, in my opinion, than other choices when it comes to certain champs. Now, some champs are just tanky. So if they're just tanky, you have a lot of freedom in how you build them. But Padma is not that tanky. So I need to get that tankiness from the gear. Okay, so for me personally, Stalwart set works really well on her. On to her bottom pieces of gear. So for that glove, I have a crit rate glove because remember, when she crits, she applies that strong version attack down for 2 turns to everybody on that opposing team. So all those minions will get attacked down along with Iragoth. So once again, definitely try to build your Padma or try to fit in that crit rate somehow, because getting that AoE decreased attack is just awesome. So next we have the chest, and here I have an HP chest, good for tankiness, but you'll notice my resist for her is not that high, so it looks like I have a little bit over 200 resist. I would have loved something like a resistance chest, but I don't have it. So you work with what you got, all right? But I have her an HP chest, you know, good for tankiness, survivability. And lastly, that speed boot, because you need her to take turns. And she is a little bit faster than Jarek, but she is not by any means outspeeding the boss. Okay, so Iragoth is 250 speed. She's not 250 speed. But once you run 2 attack down champs, So your requirement for speed is less, and that's just great. Anytime we can reduce the gearing requirements, all the better. And once again, she works just fine at this speed, even though the boss is faster, okay? Because we have two great attack down champs. So for her banner, we have her in a nice 6-star accuracy banner. Alright guys, on to Padma's Masteries. So you're going to see they're really similar to Jarrek's. Now, she is missing one tier 5 mastery, but it's okay. So main ones here, obviously War Master for that damage, right? That bonus damage based off enemy max HP. We have Life Drinker here, so when she is under 50% health, which, I mean, happens a lot, right? If she does hit and proc with that War Master, she's going to get a big chunk of healing back. And once again, as I mentioned, for these attack down champs, remember, we need to run 2 of them. The way our team comp is set up, we need Master Hexer. Okay, so we extend, or we potentially extend that 2-turn strong version attack down to a 3-turn strong version attack down. All right, so that is absolutely what we need. We need that attack down to be at least 2 turns on the boss at all times. 3 turns is better, and we will get that sometimes with Master Hexer. All right, guys, on to Syl of the Drakes. And the main reason we are using her for this team comp is not her resurrect ability, Phoenix Right, because her skills will be put on cooldown. So what does that mean? We can't have people dying in our comp. Okay. It is still possible to finish the comp if somebody is dead, but best case scenario, nobody dies. And that's the expectation for the comp. If the comp runs well, nobody dies. Okay, so having Syl on the team is not for her reviver role. Though, if you want to, you can build her super tanky, 400 resist, so she could revive if needed. Why do we have her on the team then? For her passive, that healing, 10% healing on every turn, all right? This is why we have her. This skill cannot be locked out by Iragoth. Okay, Iragoth does not have block passive skills that debuff or anything, so we are getting this healing. So we are primarily using Syl as an awesome healer. And in and of herself, she is tanky as heck, all right? So that is the main reason we are using her. So guys, let's go over Syl's gear. Now, as I have mentioned before, the tankier somebody is, the more flexibility you have in how you build them. Now, because Syl is so tanky, I actually don't have to build her in a stalwart set. Okay, that is not true of Padma. All right, and actually Jarek is similar to Syl here. You have options insofar as how you want to build him because he's so tanky. And so Syl, because I don't need to put that stalwart set on her, my option for her is that relentless set. So basically, she has an 18% chance every turn to get an extra turn. And that can proc multiple times in a row. Now, each time she is getting an extra turn, she is healing the whole team for 10% of their max health. So that is great. So once again, this synergizes really well with her passive, that boundless life, that she's getting extra healing for everybody. Okay, so if she procs 3 turns in a row, that's 30% healing for everybody right away. All right, and once again, her healing is not a skill that needs to be cast. Okay, because Iragoth puts everyone's skills on cooldown. All right, unless you build crazy high resist tanks. We're not. So Relentless works really well. Immortal as well gives her Syl extra healing, which is great for her. So this is really a good build for the team. All right, so if your Syl is dying and you try Relentless and she's dying, then go ahead and put her in something else. You can put her in Immortal gear. Regeneration gear works really well. You can put her in Stalwart gear. Okay, so it really depends on your gearing. But for my Syl, she's pretty tough. I don't need Stalwart. So once again, I am betting, hedging my bet, so to speak, on that Relentless proccing and getting extra heals for the whole team. On to Syl's bottom pieces of gear. So for the glove, I have her in an HP percentage glove, so that's going to be your best bet when you're talking about tankiness. For the chest, HP percentage chest. Once again, HP percentage for those bottom pieces is better than defense percentage because so many people and Iragoth can ignore defense at certain times. So HP percentage is going to be better. And lastly, we have her in a speed boot because she needs to take her turns to use that Boundless Life passive and get those heals off on everybody. And potentially, with the Relentless set, get those extra turns. So she needs to take turns in order for all of that to happen. So make sure you don't make your Syl slow. On to Syl's banner. So I have her now in a resistance banner because once again, we are concerned with resisting not Iragoth, but those minions, and especially that defense down debuff, and also the provoke as well. So a good healthy amount of resistance for the minions. Once again, we are not concerned with Iragoth and his debuffs. Total stats for Syl. So here we have her at 80,000 health. We have the attack at 1400, which we're not concerned about. Good amount of defense at 3,300. Speed 164. Yeah, she's super slow, but once again, when you see these numbers that aren't impressive, and yet I'm still beating Stage 120, Hard Doom Tower, Iragoth, hopefully that gives you guys hope that you guys don't need like the insanest gear and stats to do a lot of things in this game and achieve a lot. All right, so 164 obviously could be higher. Crit rate, crit damage, not concerned about. Look at that resistance though, 347. Now, notice this is a little bit higher than Iragoth's accuracy. So every once in a while she will resist Iragoth, but it's the minority. The vast majority of times, even though my resistance is higher than Iragoth's accuracy, Iragoth will still debuff Syl. Okay? Once again, that is because to resist a debuff, you need significantly more resistance than you do accuracy to land that debuff. And lastly, debuff accuracy 101. She has some really cool debuffs, which none of them work really. For the team that we're talking about for Iragoth, we can't reduce his speed, we can't reduce his turn meter. Now we can do those things to the minions, but once again, we're not really concerned with attacking the minions. So we don't need accuracy for Syl for Iragoth. Alright guys, on to Syl's Masteries. So you'll see on that offense tree, it's pretty much exactly the same as the others that you've seen. So here, big ones are Life Drinker and War Master, okay? So what about the support tree? Now, when we're talking about healers, this is why we run down this left side of the support tree right here, okay? Because we want to increase the healing. So she has that passive Boundless Life. So here we have increasing in the health. Lay on Hands increases the value of heals this champion casts by 5%. Once again, every turn she is casting heals on everybody, so great. Next we have Healing Savior. Increases the amount of healing and value of shield buffs placed by this champion by 10% if the target ally has 40% HP or less. So bonus healing for those low HP targets. It's going to happen a lot. I mean, trust me. So Healing Savior is a good choice for her. And lastly right here, Merciful Aid increases the amount of healing and the value of shield buffs placed by this champion by 15% if the target ally has stun, sleep, fear, true fear, or freeze debuffs. So Iragoth does put up those fears. Okay, so if someone is feared and still takes a turn, she is giving them bonus healing. All right, so for those masteries in the support tree, those are really the ones that are relevant to us. These two here are not relevant to us with the Iragoth fight. These are good choices for Syl in general, but not relevant to us with that Iragoth fight. Alright guys, on to Doom Priest. So another great healer for the team. And we are primarily using her for this bolster passive, which heals everybody by 7.5% of their health at the start of each turn. So that is absolutely great when it comes to healing, because no matter what, even if she is feared by the boss, she can still pull off that healing just by the start of her turn, automatically. Okay, so just like Syl of the Drakes. Plus, she has this automatic cleanse. So one debuff at the start of each turn from everybody will be cleansed automatically. Okay, great if those debuffs happen to land. Remember, we have that defense down from the minions and that provoke. So if she goes next, she can cleanse off those debuffs. So we are really using Doom Priest for her passive and that healing. On to Doom Priest's gear. So I have her in a really similar setup to Syl of the Drakes because her heal functions so similarly, right? So every time she takes the turn, she gets that bonus healing with that cleanse. So here I have her in a relentless set, so every turn she gets a chance, 18% chance, to get another turn. And that can proc right away as well. She can take 2, 3, 4, 5 turns in a row sometimes, okay? And that Immortal set increases her health by 15%, plus that gives her an additional 3% heal. So this is a good set on her if you have good Immortal and Relentless gear. If you don't, because Doom Priest in and of herself, she's not that tanky, put her in something like Stalwart, okay? Stalwart would probably be the safer choice. So if you want to use Doom Priest and you find her and Relentless is just too squishy, go ahead and use Stalwart, something like that. Because Doom Priest, she's not tough, all right? Even with her healing herself on every turn, she is just not super tough. So feel free with other gearing options with her to make her more tanky. On to Doom Priest's bottom pieces of gear. So for that glove, I have her in a defense percentage glove. HP percentage would be better, but this is okay. We have the HP percentage chest. Remember, she is healing everybody and herself based off max HP. So the more she has, the more she heals herself. So HP percentage chest, good. And also speed boot. So just like Syl of the Drakes, Doom Priest needs to take her turns in order for that passive of hers to proc, that healing and that cleanse. Plus, she needs to take a turn in order for Relentless to potentially proc. So make sure you don't make your Doom Priest too slow. On to her banner. So here you see I have her in a resistance banner because once again we want to resist those debuffs, not by Iragoth, but by those minions. And even if she doesn't sometimes, she has a really cool cleanse on her passive. On to Doom Priest's total stats. So we have her at 58,000 health, which is okay, could be better, especially if we had that HP percentage glove, which we don't have, but 58's okay. So attack 2,000, not really relevant to us, even though her damage is based on attack. How we're doing damage is with those War Master procs. So defense at 2,800, not too bad. Speed 215. If you guys have noticed so far, or maybe you haven't, none of my characters are faster than Iragoth. We're not playing a speed race, okay? It's gonna be really hard to outspeed Iragoth, plus having the stats that you need to have. All right, so once again, the cool thing about this comp is we don't need to outspeed him. That doesn't mean we don't need speed. Everyone's gonna have a speed boot. We need speed, but we don't need to outspeed Iragoth. I've seen other comps where you really do try to outspeed him, and you need really, really good gear, as I said, to build everything on your champs. So the way my comps work, you don't need a ton of speed. You don't need to outspeed Iragoth. If you would be above 200, that would be great, but you don't need to outspeed Iragoth. So here we have crit rate and crit damage, which we're not concerned about. Debuff accuracy 261. It's okay, it should be closer to 300 or above 300 to reliably resist those debuffs from the minions. But 261 she resists sometimes. And then hopefully she takes a turn and that passive kicks in where she removes debuffs or cleanses from her team. And accuracy, we're not too concerned about. On to Doom Priest's Masteries. And you can see here, the offense tree is just the same one that you've seen, all right? We have that Life Drink and we have that War Master. And very similar with Syl on the support tree, we have these three Masteries on the left side that increase that passive healing. Okay, so these three on the left side of the tree are really important for people like Syl or Doom Priest. But the rest of the skills, the rest of the Masteries on that support tree aren't too relevant to the specific fight with Iragoth. Alright guys, on to Drexthar Blood Twin. As I mentioned, he is optional if you don't need that extra 5th slot reviver. So if your team is doing just fine, then you can slot in Drexthar Blood Twin for that extra damage. And your runs will go a lot faster. But remember, he is not required, and HP burn is not required to beat Iragoth. Alright, so this dude, as good as he is optional, not required. So what does Drexthar Blood Twin give us? Well, he gives us a pretty cool passive, which when he gets hit, he has a chance to HP burn the attacker. It's just his passive. As long as he's alive and he's getting hit, he has this really high chance, 75% when booked, to HP burn the attacker. Now, once we get to that boss fight with Iragoth, everybody does AoEs on that enemy team. So everybody is getting those HP burns up. And once an HP burn ticks, everybody on that team loses 3% of their health. So multiple people up to 4, remember they're all taking their turns one by one. Every time they take their turn, 3% health lost for everybody on the enemy team. So Drex gives that to us in his passive, which is great because, as I mentioned, Iragoth is going to put our skills on cooldown. So if we had an HP burn champ that had to use a skill to apply HP burn, well, we would have to build them really high resistance. But Drex, we don't have to, all right? Because just being hit, he's going to burn everybody up, okay? And his percentage is really high, 55% unbooked. So you don't need to book him, okay? You just have to have the accuracy required. But if you have that, that accuracy check is good, then you do not need to book your Drex, okay? That 55% with all the AoEs going on, it's going to activate that HP burn all the time. Everybody is going to be burned a ton. On to Drex's gear. So I have him in 2 perception sets and an accuracy set. So each of those sets gives plus 40 accuracy. And remember, for Drex and those HP burns, we do need accuracy. And those perception sets give plus 5% speed. So good choice for Drex. Because Drex is so naturally tanky, I find I don't have to build him in Stalwart. But it depends on your gear, all right? So for me, Drexthar works just fine in these sets, and he doesn't die. Because remember, this comp is not a revival-based comp. If we had to revive people, then Syl would have to be much higher resistance. All right, we would need to be pushing 400 plus resistance on Syl. When the comp works right and it's built right, no one dies. Okay, and Drex, with these sets, he works just fine. With my gear, he doesn't die. On to Drex's bottom pieces of gear. So here I have him in an HP percentage glove. The chest is a resist chest, and when I max that out, yes, it will be higher. And lastly, I have the speed boot. Though speed isn't really needed on Drex because remember, we're using him for his passive, and that activates when he's hit. All right, so he doesn't need to take a turn just when he's hit. He can HP burn the attacker. So high speed is not needed on Drex for this boss. On to Drex's banner. So here's one of the cases where we actually have a matching chest and banner. So we have a resist chest and a resist banner because we're getting so much accuracy from the other pieces of gear, those perception and accuracy sets. So for Drex, we have him in that resistance banner. On to Drexthar's total stats. So here we have him at 50,000 health. The attack isn't relevant. Defense 3,500, really good. We have speed 207. As I mentioned, speed isn't a priority on Drex because of his passive. Crit rate and crit damage, not too bad. Helpful for the waves, but not necessary for the boss. Debuff resistance 268 should be higher. When I max out that chest piece, it will be. And lastly, we have that debuff accuracy at 340, so plenty for Iragoth. On to Drexthar's Masteries. So here you see the same thing in that offense tree. We have that Life Drinker, and we also have that War Master. As I mentioned, I put War Master on everybody. I don't care how many times their A1 hits. For me, I've never noticed any difference. So that's what I put on my Drex. It works just fine. And for the support tree, we are running down the right side of the support tree for increased accuracy. But a few things we're getting in particular, we are choosing Sniper because his HP burn skills on his A1 and passive, they are not 100% chance to land. So Sniper does work with that HP burn to increase the chance by 5% for both of those skills. And lastly, Master Hexer, because we do want to increase that HP burn from 2 rounds to potentially 3 rounds. Okay, so Master Hexer is a good choice for Drexthar. Alright guys, last but not least, on to the star of the show, we have Warlord. No, just kidding. It is Vrask. But I am not kidding when I say he is the star of the show. He is literally one of the best healers on this team. He is so good. If you have 2 of him, use them. He is that good. And so we will explain why when we talk about his skills, gear, and masteries. So as I mentioned, we are using Vrask for his healing. He has a really cool passive right here in which all he needs to do is get a critical hit on somebody. And he's going to heal everybody on the team for 10% of his max health. So a few keys here. It does not matter how hard he hits. So his damage numbers are not relevant. All he needs to do is to get a crit. That's all, a critical hit. And then he's going to heal everybody for 10% of his max HP. So healers that heal based off their max HP are typically easier to build around than healers that base their healing off everybody else's max HP. So if I build Vrask with a ton of HP, then he is healing everybody based off that. So great healing from Vrask. So how have I geared my Vrask? Now this set right here is just insane on Vrask. So here, the one I'm talking about is that retaliation set. So 35% chance to counterattack when hit. With Iragoth and everyone doing those AoEs, he's hit all the time, okay? Basically every time someone takes a turn, they're hitting everybody with those AoEs. So he is getting so many counterattacks. And what happens when he counterattacks? You know, we're building him with crit rate, so he's gonna crit on somebody, it doesn't matter who, and then he's healing the whole team for 10% of his max HP, once again, which we are building up as high as we can. So this retaliation set works so well on Vrask, and I would recommend for PvE, retaliation is better than avenging. Avenging, you need a critical hit to get that counter attack. All right, it's a higher chance, but you need a critical hit. Now in PvE, enemies don't crit you that much. Now when we're talking arena, use avenging. Okay, if you want some sort of counterattack set, use avenging, because everyone's gonna crit you in the arena all the time. All right, but when we're talking about PvE, enemies don't crit that much. So actually the retaliation set is better for Vrask if we're talking about a counterattack set. So any attack, no matter what it is, crit or non-crit, he has a 35% chance to counterattack. And when he does, he is healing the whole team, including himself, for 10% of his max health. So insane set for Vrask, and it just works so well with this comp. So let's go through Vrask's bottom pieces of gear. So on the glove, we do need to have a crit rate glove because Vrask needs to crit in order to do that healing, okay? So we need to get his crit rate 100%. Now, no matter what, there will always be a 3% failure rate chance. Plus, there are issues with affinities against certain bosses, but against Iragoth, it's no problem, okay? So we have that crit rate glove. For the chest, we have an HP chest because remember, healing everybody else is based off Vrask's max HP. So the higher max HP Vrask has, the more he heals everybody. So definitely you want to put that HP chest on your Vrask. And lastly, speed. We have a speed boot because Vrask does need to take his turns in order to heal. Now he can get those counterattacks without taking his turns, but we do want him to take his normal turns as well. All right, so definitely don't make your Vrask slow. Don't just count on those counterattacks to get your hits in. Put some speed into your Vrask so you get those regular attacks with the heals as well as those counterattacks. And on to Vrask's banner. Here, because we don't really need him to apply any debuffs, he doesn't really have any to apply in the first place, we have him in a resistance banner. So here are Vrask's total stats. So I have him at 75,000 health, so he's going to be healing for 10% of that every time he hits with a crit, which with the high crit rate, it should be every time he hits. Attack 1900, defense 1800, speed 174. As I mentioned, none of my characters are that fast, but it's good enough to beat the hardest Iragoth in Hard Doom Tower. Crit rate 101. As I did mention, there's always that 3% failure chance, so we have basically 97%. Crit damage, not really relevant to us. Debuff resistance 242. Sometimes he will resist those debuffs, but definitely not all the time. His resistance needs to be much higher. And debuff accuracy 113, we're not concerned about it because there are no debuffs that Vrask puts on anybody. Alright guys, on to Vrask's Masteries, and so the offense tree is the same one that you've seen for most of the characters here, but I wanted to mention a few down the defense tree. Now, because Vrask does not have any debuffs that he places, he really doesn't need the support tree. Now, can you go down the support tree? You can for those increased heals down the left side of the support tree, but this defense tree works really well, and let me show you why. So really what we're getting are these two counterattack masteries. So first we have Retribution here. Has a 50% chance to counterattack when this champion loses 25% of their max HP or more from a single enemy skill. And Iragoth hits really hard, alright? So this Retribution is actually going to proc really regularly. So when this happens, he has a 50% chance to counterattack. And what happens when he counterattacks? Then he heals himself and the whole team for 10% of his max health, which is a lot, all right? Plus, check this out. We have this second quote-unquote counterattack mastery, and it's Deterrence. So it has a 20% chance to counterattack an enemy when they apply a stun, sleep, fear, true fear, or freeze debuff on an ally. So out of all of these for Iragoth, he does apply that fear. So every now and then, Vrask will just rush in with an attack when someone gets feared. He is just hitting so much. So not only is he counterattacking with his gear, and there is no damage threshold with his gear, right? That Retribution gear. Basically 35% chance every time he gets hit to counterattack. So he's getting counterattacks with that. Plus, here, he's getting counterattacks as well when he takes more than 25% of his health in one hit. So with Deterrence, with Retribution, he's getting counterattacks. Plus, he is randomly rushing in with Deterrence when people get feared. He is attacking so much. He is really the MVP healer of this comp. You'll see Vrask just go crazy. That's why I mentioned he works so well. If you have two Vrasks, use them on this boss. He is that good. So I do think down the defense tree, man, it really pays off with Vrask, getting those additional attacks, which turn into additional healing for everybody. Alright guys, now we are ready to fight Iragoth. So this first composition I'm showing you does have 3 healers and 2 attack down champs. Now what is required for this comp, those 2 attack down champs? It is required, okay? For the comp I'm showing you. You can come up with your own, or different people have come up with different comps. My comp, the most consistent way it runs is with 2 attack down champs. So I'm going to say for me and what I'm showing you, those are required. Now, are these 2 particular champs required? No, they're not. Maybe you have some legendaries that are better, you've gotten lucky, or whatever. But you need 2 attack down champs, all right? With that Master Hexer mastery. That is required. So above and beyond that, whether or not you want to use 3 healers or 2 healers and Drex, it's up to you. Now, I do always run here my Jarek in the lead spot because I want that 33% increase in health. It helps out so much, okay? So that's the way I run it. You can experiment with using different auras. But for me, because I have Jarek and he's on my team and he does so much, just to have him in that spot is another thing that he does really well. Just giving everybody, just at the start of everything, 33% more health. All right, so this particular team, once again, is an HP burn-less team, and it works. But it's gonna net you close to 200 turns probably. That's the way it was for me. It's a long run, all right? So this is not the one I'm going to show you, even though it works, okay? And you can substitute in these healers. as long as you have those 2 attack down champs. Remember, this strategy is no one dies. All right. So what we're going to do is actually just slot in Drex because it's a much faster run. So if I can find him, he's here somewhere. There you go. It is a much faster run. It's cut in half or more. Okay, so if you can fit in Drex, I would say go ahead. It's going to make your run so much faster. But if your champs or your gear isn't really up to par, you may need to run 3 healers instead of 2 healers and a Drex. Last thing, once you get to Iragoth, make sure to target him with your cursor or to tap him because it just makes the run faster. There's no problem if you don't, you still should complete the run, but really we want to be focused on Iragoth. So try to target him once you get to him to just speed up the run a little bit. Alright guys, that is it. Now we did lose Drex at the very end, but most of the time he lives. If you're having this issue, go ahead and put a stalwart set on him. But as you see, this comp works. And as I mentioned, if you don't have Drex or you don't want to use him, you think you need another healer, go ahead and sub him in with another Vrask, with the Doom Priest, whoever, alright? But this is your free-to-play comp for the Hard Doom Tower, Stage 120, Iragoth. Alright guys, that is it for today. I hope this has been helpful to you guys to beat that final stage in the Hard Doom Tower. And no, you don't need any crazy legendaries to do it above and beyond Syl. That's pretty much it. So if this has been helpful, guys, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.